Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, which are dwindling by the number every day because of certain circumstances happening. Welcome to the Common Sense Show. I'm Dave Hodges, the host, and this is the show that's freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. And we like to branch out and look at different topics, and we're going to do that today. We're going to look at UFO disclosure, and you've heard my view on this for years. But I'm not arrogant enough to think that my view is 100% complete or even 50% complete. I have an open mind, and we have a guest today, Matt Vaughn, that's going to, I think, give us some confirming facts that we've talked about, but also get us to consider other aspects of the argument here. And we are always open to exploring this because I'm not here to support anybody. I'm here to arrive at the truth. We're brought to you by Noble Gold. We're coming to you from the Noble Gold Studios. And Noble Gold is where you want to be right now. The economy is going off the cliff, and I'll spare you all the elaborations why. But if your retirement's associated with a bank, the banks can take a Dodd-Frank 2010. They can take your bank account, Dodd-Frank 2010, UCC code section 8. Why would you let them do that? Oh, you need to be in banking, but you need to be smart about it. Noble Gold can help you. I have been a customer for 9 years. So I put my money where my mouth is, and I encourage you to do the same thing. 877-646-5347 is the number to call. 877-646-5347. And if you forget the number, you go, oh, Dave, I forgot that number. DaveHodgesGold.com makes it really easy. Okay, well, Matt Vaughn has a similar background to me. I mean, I spent some time being a therapist, and Matt is a psychotherapist, has been for 15 years. He works with clients from over 30 countries in private practice and has worked in notable mental health and addiction treatments. I did addiction treatment too, so we share that as well. MA in psychology from the University of West Georgia. And he adheres a lot to Abraham Maslow, which is an interesting guy. That takes me to one of my favorite guys, Viktor Frankl, on the same line. He's been researching the paranormal for 35 years. Um, and I could keep going through this, but I just want to mention his book off the top because we'll talk about it before we're done too. Um, you can go to mycosmictrigger.com and find the book, um, High Strangeness in Theory and Practice. And this is fantastic. He's written articles too, but we'll cover all that with you. So when we leave this interview, you go, wow, Dave, he confirmed a lot of you and he gave us some new ideas. And I want to know more. Well, we're going to send you to the place at the end of the interview where you can get more. Matt, first time appearance on the Common Sense Show. It's great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. And I love your background. It's so appropriate for our discussion. Um, where do you think we should start with? Well, let me tell you this. I was a kid when I first read in my local newspaper about the Betty and Barney Hill deal. And I mean, a kid. I was in elementary school, and I was so taken by the article, and I don't know why I was compelled, but I had this electric football game I used to play on snowy days, and I took the article and put it between the board and the box that covered the board. And I kept it there for years and years and years. And I wished I still had it. But Betty and Barney Hill was my awakening to this topic that there might be more to this than meets the eye. How about you? How did you get interested in this topic?
Well, that's a great image, by the way, the old electronic football game. That's good. I like that. I'm old enough to have seen those in action. Um, just a little bit. I got into this. It's really the first subject I was into. It ever since I was a kid in elementary school. These were the first books I checked out from the library. Books on ghost hunting and Bigfoot and all paranormal subjects, so including UFOs. But where I really, my research kind of went to that next level, more sort of the type of research that I'm still writing about today is in the mid to early 90s. And when I was getting on bulletin board systems, I don't know if you remember
I do.
BBSs. But BBS is such a fascinating history of the internet. It's the precursor to the internet.
Mhm.
And I was essentially calling into one website at a time with a modem. And I was calling in and looking at these BBSs that were about UFO disclosure, paranormal subjects. That's where I learned about Area 51. Now, this was when it was a rumor, it was a conspiracy, it wasn't verified, but I'm reading about it on these BBSs, and it's really exciting my mind. I'm learning about Bob Lazar. This is in high school. And as I say in my book, when the X Files came out, I was so deep into this, I didn't even watch the X Files because I viewed that as just entertainment, whereas I was doing the true research, on these BBSs.
The one thing about the X-Files that caught my attention, though, was the secret cabal, because I do believe one exists and decides what we get to see. That's what my research has led me to. But I agree with it. It was entertainment. Uh, but
Well, look, I like the show. I was just a kid. I had a very arrogant view of things, but I've watched this show since, and it's a great show. So no disrespect to the creators of that show.
no, I agree with you. There were a couple things in there that really caught my attention and stay with me to this day. But as a whole, I agree it was entertainment. But what I liked that it did, it awakened to the public that there's more to our reality than some realize.
And
And I,
one of the things, I'm sorry, Dave.
go ahead.
Um, well, one of the things I've been saying to people on my Substack, on Facebook, is watch the X Files if you want to get prepared for what I believe is coming. Watch the X Files like it's a documentary, and that will get you closer to the truth than not.
Yeah. My dad did intelligence work, and one of the things
Oh Lord.
yeah, yeah, but he was one of the good guys. And because he did it through naval intelligence, he wasn't, well, I have a friend who's coming on my show tomorrow, is ex-CIA high level, and some of these guys are really good guys. But some of them would sell their mother down the river, and that's my dad's quote. But he worked with captured German scientists after World War II. In fact, he came into it late, like the late 50s and into the 60s. And he asked the Germans, how did you get so far ahead in your theoretical physics? And they said to him universally, we got it from aliens. Question, did you ever meet them? No. And my dad thought, well, he knew about the occultic practices of the Nazi scientists and actually their entire government. And he concluded it might be demonic. And that's what he told me. But he also learned about Project Bluebeam, which is a fake alien invasion. What's your opinion on Bluebeam?
Oh man, we are jumping right into it, Dave. The hot sauce. So my opinion on, okay, Project Bluebeam. Okay, it's definitely possible that that is in the works. I think the last couple 2 days, and yeah,
I'm sorry, Matt, you're breaking up pretty
that
bad.
is possible. But I here's where I want to push back. It feels like
Matt, you're breaking up really bad.
okay.
Okay. Well, I think we've got the communication issue straightened out. If you heard my interview on John B. Wells 2 nights ago, Caravan to Midnight, our interview was interrupted 5 times, and they couldn't get a hold of me through my cell phone or even my wife's cell phone. I mean, this was deliberate. And so I think we're getting a little interference here. Matt has taken some steps. I think we're good to go and back in the fold. And Matt, I had brought up the notion of Project Bluebeam, and I just wanted to get your quick opinion on that.
I definitely think Project Bluebeam is possible. The only thing, and I pointed out, Dr. Stephen Greer has been talking about that recently. I don't know if you follow his stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting factoid, Dave. Dr. Stephen Greer was a medical ER doctor in the county that I live in. So
Ooh.
kind of an interesting synchronicity. Um, he may have sewed up my leg when I was a kid, but that's a whole nother story. Um, Project Bluebeam, it's definitely possible. The only thing I will push back on, I feel like people in the ufology space are, anytime any government disclosure is happening, it's sort of this knee-jerk response to say, oh, it's Project Bluebeam. And I don't view it that way. I don't think every single thing that is government disclosure related is related to Project Bluebeam. But it is definitely something I think to keep in mind, especially since you've heard this through your family connections.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I don't think it's the only way to view this, but let's put it this way. I'm mindful. If we were to have a sudden alien threat, I would be extremely suspicious as to the intent behind it. And I was conditioned by my father. He told me stuff he shouldn't have told me in the last 2 years of his life, which was in the mid 80s. And so it definitely influenced me. And I held that for a long time and didn't act on it because he told me I couldn't until after my mom was gone because she could lose everything. You know, if you violate national security protocols, they can take all your property and they don't need a judicial process to do it. They can put you in prison without, under the NDAA, without any. So I had to wait until my mom passed and then I finally started talking about this topic. I noticed here from the background too that you've paid some attention to J.D. Vance and his assertion that aliens are actually demonic. And I think there's a possibility that at least, in fact, Ted Broer and I talked about this yesterday on air. We think it's some of it, but not necessarily all of it. What's your position on J.D. Vance and what he said?
Well, first of all, I want to say we certainly live in interesting times when the sitting vice president has said he thinks they're demons. So um, pretty interesting times. I think it could be. So in my book, My Cosmic Trigger, I want to sort of just let everybody know how I view that book. The
Okay.
book is meant to be it's essentially like a textbook. And if you read my book, you will get caught up to speed on all of the theories of all of this weird stuff,
Mhm.
from ufology to ghosts to Bigfoot. And it is presents sort of a unified field theory of all of these subjects. And what I'm trying to do is show that all of the academic sort of discourse around this subject since the beginning. So I say all that to say this question about that they could be demonic um, has been explored in ufology since the beginning. And I explore those theories in the book so everybody has the full picture of all the different theories. This fits into the interdimensional hypothesis. So you're hearing a lot about this now, that these aliens are not little green men from Mars, but are interdimensional. And meaning they come from some other dimension, not just traveling through space in a spaceship.
Mhm.
Um, Here's the thing. Since you're up in the ante, we're talking about some really hot takes, Dave, with your dad and everything. Going to make me nervous the rest of the day. Thanks very much. But there appears to be, the more you research this, the image you get is war in heaven, the image of war in heaven. So you have everybody keeps asking, are they good? Are they good UFOs? Are they bad UFOs? So this long story short, there appears to be really, really good ones and really, really bad ones. And if you research this enough, the research about the really, really bad ones, it's hard for you not to think maybe they're demonic. Now it
I think
brings
in
up a
part,
question. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
I think you're right, Matt. I think in part, I had two very close friends that were very close to this topic. In fact, they were both best friends with Art Bell, and um, they introduced me to Sergeant Bob Dean, and Bob and I had some
Oh, wow.
encounters with. We would do private briefings for people on stuff we were finding out, and people like Richard Hoagland was attending, and people like him, and actually we had some astronauts attend and top scientists. We all had to sign non-disclosure agreements. But Sergeant Bob Dean was the senior non-com in NATO. That's the power of a general. And he said very clearly in our briefings we did together, Bob said that there were 26 different alien species and that some are good guys and some would like to wipe us off the universe, but they're prevented by some cosmic agreement that they can't do it. That was his position.
Yeah, that's what my research indicates. And it's that concept. So this book we're talking about, my book, My Cosmic Sugar, is a nonfiction book, but I've recently written a novel called America's Greatest Ascension Team, which is the fictional version of my nonfiction book. And this concept is spoiler alert. What you just said is the basis of the whole book.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Interesting. Well, Bob it's interesting. He had to battle a wife that didn't want him to make any disclosures. And so we always had to work around that. And no offense to her, she was a lovely person, but she was being protective. And he wasn't in the best health. I mean, he would do his presentations from a wheelchair with a blanket over his legs. So I understand her protection, but he was adamant. And I asked him, I said, Bob, how high does this go? I said, is this just a NATO thing? He goes, every important world leader is involved, and I've briefed most of them. So, I mean, this is high level stuff. So you're on the right track, I think, with this. But also, too, I'm mindful of Genesis 6, verse 4. And I've done some, Christian conference presentations on this, and I've been told this is the big debate in eschatology now, that the last phrase there is, and they were there afterward. After what? Well, the fallen angels, DNA, survived the flood. That's that's how I read, and a lot of people are reading that passage. So do you think that the demonic hybrids that intermarried with Earth women, you think their DNA survives to today and they're having an impact on our society and they're part of this cosmic conspiracy?
good Lord, maybe. I mean, here's the way I look at it, Dave. Um, I'm willing to believe and entertain just about anything these days,
Of course.
except for flat Earth, as I like to say. No offense to my flat Earth brothers and sisters, okay? But you know what you just said, I want to sort of lay that out for the audience that maybe is not knee deep in the weeds in this. What you just laid out is like the strangest thread of this research. So when I started this journey, I was more of a moderate sort of researcher. But the more you get into it, the more these highly strange theories appear that's what's going on, something that strange. And I'm guessing you saw the with what Matt Gates said about the hybrid breeding program that he was briefed on. So it's hard not to consider those sort of things when you have a literal ex-member of Congress saying that's what he was told.
I've had the same encounter informally. I didn't do blind dates, but I made an exception one time when I was 23 years old, just out of college. And two friends of mine, a couple, insisted I meet this one lovely girl. And so finally I did. St. Patrick's Day, I think it was like, I forget the year, it was in the 1980s. Anyway, she was lovely and intelligent. And so my friends leave, and it's just her and me, and she's a teacher. Okay, well, at that time, I was teaching in a high school and I was a coach. And so I said, well, what grade do you teach? I assumed she was elementary. And she said, I teach kind of all grades, but that's not the perspective. And I said, what do you mean? She says, I teach alien hybrids how to fit into society. Now,
What?
at 23, I didn't have the awareness, Matt, that I do now. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I thought she was loony. Today, I'd love to have that conversation in full part, but that's when I first heard about this. So when you talked about Matt Gates, I've heard this. She went on and she said, "Let me tell you a little bit about it." And I'm trying to pretend to be interested. And she's telling me, "Yeah, they're breeding kids and they come to people like me to educate them." I said, "Where's your school?" "In the mountains in Colorado," but she wouldn't be specific. So, and I'd have no way to backtrack and find out who this is because I'd sure love to talk to her. But that's very parallel to what you said about Matt Gates. And you look at too, what did Anna Paulina say, Congresswoman? Oh, they're real, but it's classified and I can't talk about it. So it's kind of where we're at with this, I think. Do you see
Right.
you see an agenda that's threatening to humanity? I think that's what people really want to know.
Yes. The more you research it, there appears to be two factions, a good one and a bad one. That's just the simple way to say it. And that's why I get so frustrated in this space when people are talking about it. It's so black and white. They're like, well, are they good or are they bad? The answer is both. What the research shows. Um, it's a lot to pull. It's a lot to chew on, Dave. Since you're a therapist as well, what I find most interesting is, I mean, not most interesting. I mean, there's so many interesting aspects of this topic, but I, okay, to go back to us, that we have been, how I've been researching this since I was a young person. I think in order to sort of grasp and accept the reality of what we're being presented, that I think it takes a lifetime of research and experiences, or else I think this stuff is beyond belief. That's the word I have been thinking lately. Beyond belief. How do you believe there is an alien hybrid breeding program? How does one believe that? I have bills to pay, I have dishes to clean. How am I supposed to also put that into my life?
I want to go back to the Gates thing for a second because I think this answers your question indirectly. I'm surprised he made that revelation, and I'll tell you why. I know about National Security Oath 450 or whatever they call it today, and they can do anything they want to you, especially under the NDAA now. And you would think that's a state secret. So, you know what my guess is? This was a planned leak. The authorities want us to consider this.
Yeah, that's my thought. I would tend to agree with that. And it's one of the first things I read on these BBSs way back in the early 90s was this idea of a slow rolled planned disclosure. So I forget which document I'm reading, but it was the idea that there's certain aspects in the military, in the government, that are slowly preparing us for this reality.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people in the ufology field, and it just drives me up a wall, they're just weeping and gnashing their teeth. They want the full truth and nothing but the truth right now. And I don't view it that way. I'm totally fine with a slow process. And it does seem like it's ramping up with the things that are being disclosed.
You're familiar with the Brookings report, right?
No.
Oh, okay. This was it was written, gosh, by the Brookings Institute. And it was a document that became official NASA stuff. And people, Richard Hoagland, I think, was the original guy to leak it when he was working inside of NASA. And it's authentic. And in that, it supports your position of a slow desensitization for the public. In the document, they say, as we're going out to space, and this is 1959, so they were already talking about a space program, and then JFK made it a reality with NASA, and they said if we go out there and we find proof that we're not alone, we need to cover it up because this will destroy religion, people will panic, economies could collapse, and they even went on to say something else. If we ever found out that they have visited us here, we need to cover that up too. And that became the cornerstone of NASA, which stands in my book for never a straight answer. And that became their guiding light. And so the Brookings report supports what you think we should do, which you got to get people used to this radical idea. But I want to say this real quick and get your reaction to it. I come at this from a Christian perspective, but I'm also open-minded to know the Bible has open gaps in this. You have Ezekiel's wheel. He saw a UFO and it's in the Bible. So it's not anti-biblical to talk about this. But the thing that I look at though is a lot of my Christian friends are very, very close-minded. And this is why they're really locked into it's demonic. And I think there's a reason to consider that. Do you think JD Vance is correct? Or is he playing out a mission in your book to lead us away from the real truth? What do you think?
Well, that is a way to look at it, but I like to be optimistic. Because here's a more optimistic way to view this. There's so many dimensions to this subject that, okay, if they're literally a faction that is interdimensional and so evil that the only way for us to conceptualize it is to call them demons, then that is a really important subject for people to start wrapping their heads around. Um, so I view it more that this is one aspect. He's speaking to the interdimensional hypothesis and getting people sort of open to that. But also, I don't know what he does and doesn't know. That to me is another question I ask about these world leaders, like which ones are read into this, which ones have the information. But I want to remind people, if we're talking demons, what's the other side of demons?
Angels.
Yeah. So it's like it drives me up the wall when everybody's saying, oh, it's demonic. Well, there's two sides to this coin.
I think that's an excellent point. I really do. And maybe this is the underlying element of it's good and evil. And it's something I didn't discuss with Bob Dean because I really wasn't that familiar with Genesis 6, verse 4, while he was alive. And I would like to have considered that part of it. But certainly there's change. How do you look at technology transfer? Like I'm sure you've heard of Philip Corso and Roswell and so forth. How do you view the huge technological advances we've made since the 1950s, early 1950s?
I one of the aspects of UFO disclosure that I have been talking about and I think is most interesting um, is the technological advance, the technology of this of aliens. So as I like to say, the little green men didn't get here on gasoline. They had some sort of advanced propulsion device, a free energy device. So this is what Dr. Stephen Greer talks about in
Hmm.
his documentary, The Lost Century, of all of these free energy devices that have been suppressed. And I think that is one of the reasons the UFO topic is kept under wraps, is because of the technology behind it. I mean, we're talking also, so the little green men didn't get here on gasoline. And also, I bet the little green men don't have colds. Last week I was at a cold and flu season. I'm out all week. So I would imagine they have advanced technologies in many facets of their life that to us would appear as magic and miraculous. So I think that is a big component of this topic, of the technology behind it. And I don't know if you've seen this, Dave, but it recently came out in the Epstein files that Epstein claimed he suppressed cold fusion in 1989. That was Stanley Pons's cold fusion discovery. I don't know if you remember that.
No, but
This,
this fits in with what I know to be true.
yeah. So
Let,
Stanley
let, let me share.
Pons. Yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead, hit
share.
me with it.
Let me share this with you because you're going to probably want to talk to me privately about this because there's some things I can say and I can't say. Um, I was involved with Bill Pollock, ex-CIA, ex-Air Force Intel, and Vance Davis, NSA. And we were three peas in a pod, and we had a company, and we were doing business with Enron. Enron had purchased land in the San Luis Valley in Colorado, and Bill was doing a lot of the work on Tesla technology, okay? Quantum physics, as we would call it today. And Enron was highly interested. And then there's this law that overarches everything. It's called the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. If the government determines you're bad for business overall, you're bad for national security, they can take your invention, and if you don't comply, they'll put you in prison. Well, Ken Lay, we were on a conference call with Ken Lay, the head of Enron at the time, the guy that was scandalized, supposedly committed suicide, which I don't believe. And he said, you all better have your dead man switches in line because the government doesn't want this to come out. And sure enough, 6 weeks later, boom, Enron goes down in a scandal where they had no previous history of any illegal activity. And we were going to build a community with 0 point energy in the San Luis Valley, and Enron was fully behind it. And that got smashed to smithereens. And nothing happened to the three of us. I was afraid of legal backfire to us. It didn't, but we were monitored closely during that time. So you're right. And my dad told me too. He said a decision was made, and he knew this from his work. After World War II and Tesla technology, the Philadelphia experiment, all this, they made a decision that students would be taught three-dimensional physics as long as possible and the quantum model would be out there and they'd consider leaks of it to be science fiction and try to demonize it that way. But today, quantum physics has really made leaps and bounds advances. So, what you're saying here, I happen to know for a fact, I've lived it, that there is technology suppression that we've received.
Oh Lord, Dave. Yeah. By the way, I don't think I'm a little too paranoid to hear anything you have to say off the record about this subject. This is wow, that is blowing my mind, man. Completely blowing my mind. Yeah. So the more you research this subject, the free energy stuff. When I say this subject, I mean high strangeness, which is my book is My Cosmic Trigger: High Strangeness in Theory and Practice. High strangeness is when two or more paranormal subjects intersect.
Mhm.
And so so I want to point that out to the listener. What we're talking about here, when you research this phenomena, it's not just, you can't research just UFOs. If you research UFOs, then you're going to run into free energy, then you're going to run into biblical issues of good and evil, and they all intersect.
I agree. And I think all of these viewpoints deserve consideration. I think the truth lies in some combination of all of it. I really do. Wow, this is such a fascinating topic. I will tell you something I know too, and my dad told me this in the 80s. He said he knew for a fact that certain presidents were kept from this information. He said he had seen a document one time. They had the levels of security related to what they called MJ-12, the secret group supposedly dealing with aliens and technology transfer in lieu of accepting abductions. And the president was on level 18 for the security agreement.
Oh, wow.
So this is a lot of what you're alleging here, I think is exactly right on the money. But I think JD Vance's demonic thing, I think it has some validity. He's a Christian. I think he probably believes some of it. But the way it's coming out, I'm telling you, in my mind, it's a psyop. They don't want us to look at another aspect of this.
It's possible. I mean, with this subject of how multidimensional it is, I would be there's no way I can say I know for sure. But one of the things I tried to do, and as a former therapist, you might appreciate this. I am by definition, by history, a negative thinker. So I can get really dark really quick. So I try. One thing I'm trying to offer this conversation is a positive view of what's being disclosed.
Okay.
How we can look at it. Maybe this is a positive thing. Versus it's all a psyop. Could be, but I feel like enough people are looking at it from that lens, and I'm trying to offer it from this other, more positive.
Well, whoever the decision makers are, and my mind goes to the secret cabal and the X-Files, okay, when I think of this kind of stuff. But whoever decides this, there's always a technology delay. And I used to teach sociology, the first thing I taught at a college, and they call it technological delay. In other words, we had microwave technology as early as the 40s, okay? But it doesn't get into the mainstream until the 70s. The internet was developed in the early 60s as a workaround to destruction of communications by nuclear war, but we don't get the internet until the 90s. And that there's always a technologically delay. So let's assume we're getting technology transfer from aliens. Do you have any notion on why we don't get this stuff in real time and why it's so spread out?
Well, see, I do talk about this in my book. And so here's the thing with free energy, and I want to say, I do not support any suppression of people's livelihoods, and Stanley Pons, his work was suppressed. And Dave, actually, my family is friends with the Pons family. So the reason I know about this story is because it was my dad was friends with Stanley in high school. So I have followed this story since I was a kid. Um, but here's the thing: free energy, if you have a device that can run your house in perpetuity, run your car, no more gas, that radically changes the structure of society. So
Yes.
I don't support doing anything bad to inventors or whatever. However, it's not lost on me how big of a uh, task this is to implement this exotic science fiction level technology into the general public. It would radically destabilize things. And one of the things I like to say is, Mad Max, the Mad Max environment, we have this sort of image of Mad Max. I don't know if you know the movies,
Yes.
but lack of energy creates a Mad Max world. Actually, I argue free and abundant energy creates a Mad Max world. And what's now required, if we have free energy, like you were doing with this community, we have to come up with new social structures that we can live in a post free energy society, so there's not friction in the social realm. So that's what the way I kind of view what y'all were doing, coming up with this new living approach. So I think part of the reason is it's not introduced is um, for lack of understanding how to pull it off. So, it's easy for me to sit back and nitpick this stuff, but if I really had any sort of power and say somebody said, Matt, okay, figure out how to introduce free energy, that would be a really tough task. Am I making sense, Dave?
Yes. Your argument today in 2026 is right on the money. I agree with you. The societal disruption and the economic upheaval would be significant. But there was a time, let's go back to this. This is well known. Tesla in 1899 on New Year's Eve sent an electrical current without wires from Colorado Springs, 70 miles north to the Capitol Hill area of Denver, and lit up a house. And he drew the fascination of the elite, the Westinghouses and the Edisons and all these people. In fact, Tesla worked with Edison. Westinghouse and the other elite will shun him because they wanted to put a meter on electricity and have a grid and make money. And Tesla said, we can do it for free. And he got shunned, and the only work he could get was with the Navy developing Navy technology. Um, we had a chance then to implement the free energy now. And I do agree with you that today, if we implemented this on a broad spectrum, and I think the technology clearly exists, the disruption to people who make money off utilities and all the supportive services would be devastated. And hence, I think that's why we have the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how to pull it off. If anybody ever gives me large sums of money to give my opinions, I'll try to figure out some ideas and throw it out there. But
Have you looked at Tesla as having possible alien contact for his amazing inventions?
I've just seen that idea. I don't know much about it. The way I want to point something out, like I like to remind people, and I talk about this in the book, as a high strangeness researcher, who I'm somebody who is into all of paranormal, ghost, Bigfoot, um, power spots on the earth. So I am a generalist. I sort of jack of all trades, master of some. I know about a little about a lot of paranormal subjects. So I have not deep dove into the Tesla thing, but yeah, I am aware of that.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that that's true, but I think it's possible. When you can take a destroyer and make it invisible to an opposing enemy and actually displace its physical existence, allegedly to another dimension and bring it back, that's amazing technology. And this is 1943 when this happened, and this was real. The problem is for the crew, a lot of them died. We didn't know how to do it without harming humans. We didn't understand the effects. But I got to believe DARPA is all over this kind of technology. I mean, look at UFOs. They're flying along. Now you see them, now you don't. Same thing. It's the
Right.
same exact thing. Um, Looking here about the reverse engineering, though, um, What do you think there's an agenda behind the technology they let us have? So I know some people that believe that, like the late Jim Mars.
Maybe. Once again, like I said, we have a former congressman saying out loud that there are alien hybrid breeding programs. So I think it would be insane it would not be logical to consider all of this stuff we're talking about. Um, yeah, I think it's possible. That's not a subject I've deep dove into, but it makes sense given all of what's been going on that there is a slow release of the technology. And maybe that's part of the overall sort of disclosure project to slow roll this because the technology we use changes our consciousness.
Yeah, it reminds me of like Microsoft, you know. They have Microsoft One and it soon becomes outdated. You got to buy Microsoft Two. And that's how I see the alien rollout of this technology. By alien, could it be demonic? Well, partially. Could it be good? Well, partially. So, but with the rollout of the technology seems to be on a time release. And that time release has been going on at least since Roswell. And to me, this is absolutely fascinating. But I think also, too, we won't see total free energy. And my theory is, why would you give up control you can exhibit over people if you control their utilities? You control their water and the shipment of it, you know, to the homes. You control the electrical grid and the power system, the storage of your food. That's enormous power. What government would give up that kind of power?
I have a pitch for you. The only way to unleash the power of AI is through free energy. So
Mm.
if a government wants to stay ahead, I mean, we're in an AI arms race right now. So just pitching this to these people that might be listening to your show, given your background, it's like, hey, this is my idea. Like, here's a little idea. Let's run one of these AI data centers with a free energy technology. Maybe slow roll it that way. But we're going to need more power to power these talking computers, y'all.
That is a fascinating point. Wow. I'm gonna have to consider that when we're off air because I really like that idea. I think you're right on the money with this. Um, do you feel you have a historical base? Okay, it seems to be fairly similar to mine. So you have the ability to look back and you see and behavior patterns repeat. Does that give you an inclination about how close we are to total disclosure where they're going to stop hinting and start saying?
I think we are so close. I think we have essentially had soft disclosure. Um, to me, hard disclosure, as I like to point out, is a president coming on, giving a State of the Union, saying, "Yeah, guess what? We have uh, aliens are real." A UFO being displayed at the Super Bowl halftime show, a press conference with an alien from some species. That would be hard disclosure. But essentially, we've had soft disclosure, in my opinion. And I don't know if you've seen this documentary, The Age of Disclosure. I mean, you had Secretary of State Rubio on there. That's a high-ranking presidential, official from the administration. So I think we've already had soft disclosure, and I think we are so close. I could be wrong, of course, but that's my prediction. I think we're going to get disclosure from the current president, like a fish, sort of, kind of officially within this year. When I say sort of, kind of officially, I mean not like a literal alien from another species doing a joint press conference.
Yeah, or like the day the Earth stood still, where Michael Rennie's alien ship lands on on the mall in front of the White House. Did you ever see that movie?
No, no.
Oh, you should. You should go. The day the Earth stood still. It was a movie that was at least 70 years ahead of its time. It came out in the early 50s. I mean, it could have been made today. And the geopolitics in it, and the nature of people, and the fear of the unknown. I mean, it's all there in this movie. And the technology was very far reaching. They had a robot that was totally AI. This is in the
Oh, wow.
1950s. Yeah, I'm telling you, you want to go watch this movie. I always tell people if you want a starting point to kind of understand where this is headed, go watch The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's fascinating, fascinating movie. Um, but let me ask you this on the sci-fi side of things, what kind of TV shows or movies do you think really conveys an accurate message?
I think X-Files.
It
I
was,
think that is closer to that's kind of sort of what's going on now. There's so many moving parts. Is it 100%? No, but yeah, I think that's probably more correct than not.
yeah, I became afraid of AI before I knew what AI was. Um, Space Odyssey, right? That movie. Open the pod bay doors, Hal. I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to give some machine that kind of control. And that I actually was making a judgment about AI then before there was ever AI. It was only in movies. So
Right.
that movie made a real impression on me.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out. Of course, I've heard of that, but I haven't watched it.
2001: A Space Odyssey is what it was called.
Oh, that one. Yeah, yeah, of course. I know I haven't seen it fully, but
Yeah, and that movie really was the rage at the time it came out. It was, and I was young at the time, and I saw it, and it scared the heck out of me because I remember asking my dad. He couldn't talk about his work then, and I asked my dad. I said, "Do you think any of this stuff could be real?" He goes, "Yeah, someday, maybe." He had to be real coy. This was the kind of physics he was working on.
good
Uh,
Lord.
yeah, and with the German, hey, listen, the Germans were talking about interdimensional travel to my father's team as early as 1959.
Good Lord.
Yeah, so this is why what you're saying here, I'm sure you might talk to some talk show hosts that are going to be a little taken back and say, "Well, I think we need more information." Okay, I've because of family background, I've walked down this path, and I appreciate what you're saying. Let's talk about how people can get your book and follow your work. And here's another thing too I want to do, Matt. As we approach disclosure with more revelations, I'd like to get you back on the show to get your take on it.
Oh, I would love it. I would love it.
But how do people follow you?
Uh, you can go to just Amazon.com. You can get the book there. And
Cool.
my up-to-date writings are on Substack. My Substack is called Salus of the Wake. So that's where
How do
I
you
put
spell
everything.
Salus?
Salus,
US. Okay.
Salus of the Wake. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff, Matt. We're going to definitely have you back on because we're living in an age where this is an evolving topic. Good work on this. And I'll tell you, I love the background. I myself need to get a green screen and become more creative. That's a fact. By the way, I got to tell you something before we close. I have a dear friend named Dr. Ted Broer, and he owns one of the biggest natural health care companies in the world. And he's had dinner with Netanyahu, George Bush. I mean, this guy runs in high circles. He told me yesterday on my show and didn't warn me. We're talking about the Artemis mission that's going to circle the moon. And he said, yeah, they have a couple of aliens involved in that project.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I asked him after we got off, I said, you mean human looking? He goes, oh yeah, hybrids. He goes, absolutely. And he said,
Oh my
he said,
gosh.
I can't tell you how I know, but I thought you'd find that comment interesting. Yeah, he slipped that in. It was kind of a let's slip it between the sentences of what we're talking about. I go, whoa, wait a minute. Did I hear what I just heard? So that's pretty fascinating. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been fun and fascinating, and it's good for me to get away from hardcore geopolitics, which is dominating our society today.
Right. Yeah, really enjoyed it, man. Fascinating. Amazing
Thank,
stuff.
thanks, Matt. Like I said, we'll have you back on. Ladies and gentlemen, share this. We need to open people's minds. Take care.